Hello, I'm Beth. Welcome to my yoga block party. So in this yoga practice, I'm going to be using blocks for every single yoga pose. Now you might find, or you might think that using props, especially blocks, makes the poses easier. Sometimes that is the case. We are also going to explore using the blocks where it makes some poses more difficult and then some just maybe more interesting. So make sure you have at least 2 blocks and let's get started. We are going to start with a pose on our hands and knees. We're going to start right off with something that probably will make the pose more challenging. We're going to do bird dog on hands and knees. So have your 2 blocks and let's just take the blocks under the hands for a second and feel how that feels to have your tabletop with the blocks under the hands. Now you might find a little more lift in your upper body. Might feel a little different than what you're used to. See if you can draw your ribs in together, draw your front hip points in together, have a strong center. We will need that for this balance pose. And then slide one block back so that it comes underneath your knee. So now we're going to have one block under the knee, one block under the hand, opposites. And you'll feel this has already made your table quite unstable. Now you'll see that my foot on the knee, I've got my toes still on the ground. That will help give me a little bit more stability as I stretch the opposite leg out straight. Now I want to draw everything in, see if I can find my firm tabletop position. And then if this feels okay, reach your back leg back. You can stretch it back, flex or point the foot. And then you have the option to reach your opposite arm front. And last little thing is take those toes of the block or the knee that is on the block off the ground. And you'll see I'm super wobbly here. See if you can hold for one breath. And then take that back down and we'll try that on the other side. Was that a little more challenging? Hopefully a little more fun too. All right, let's stabilize first. Find your center. Make sure that the muscles in your front body, your torso, your core are engaged. And then slide the block under the opposite hand back to the knee. Try to find your center, although you'll be hard to find that. The hip will be kicked up. That's totally normal. Let those toes come to the mat for a little stability and then stretch your back leg out. Now, at first, this might actually feel a little bit more stable. You've got your back foot anchored. And then we'll start lifting things away from the mat, starting with the back leg. Reach the back leg out, either point or flex the foot, whatever helps you have more stability. You can stay right here or reach the opposite arm out long as well. And then last bit, if you can, let's see if I can on this side, lift the toes that are still anchoring you to the ground. See if you can hold a breath or two. Wobbling is totally okay. And then gently touch everything down and come back down. Okay, we'll start in the same place with the blocks under the hands. This time we're going to do a down dog, up dog combo. And I hope you'll find that actually this might be a little bit easier, giving you a little bit more space in these 2 poses. So from your hands and knees position, this time place your blocks a little ahead of you on the mat. Make sure they are still on the mat so that they won't slide off. So your hands come a little ahead of your shoulders. Your knees are still under your hips to start. Now your blocks can be either under your entire hand, or you might find that you like the edges of the wrists off the blocks, and you'll have to play around with that yourself. Tuck your toes, and then we'll lift up into our downward facing dog position. Now I love downward dog. With the blocks, you'll see my heels are coming close to the floor, which they do not do when I don't use the blocks. Stretch your hips, get as much length as you can in your spine. And then start to come forward into a plank with the hands under the blocks. And again, I feel like I have a lot more lift and freedom when I do it this way. And then if you'd like to come into an up dog, you can take the tops of your feet to the ground, let your torso lower, but keeping your thighs hovering off the ground. And that is your up dog. Let's try one more. Flip your toes, back into downward facing dog. And then come forward, first to plank, flip your toes again, come into upward dog, and then set your knees down. You can walk the blocks in and release. We'll practice a lunge next. I think this is a pose where it's maybe more interesting than easy or difficult, but you can see what you think. So one block ahead of you on the mat. Have the other one nearby. You might want it for a little stability, or if you have a wall nearby like I do, you can use the wall. And we're going to step one foot so that it comes onto the block. And then again, you can keep a hand on your thigh, a hand on the block, a hand on the wall. So this, I say, is interesting because we're just trying to find out how this might feel differently than if we weren't using the blocks. Do the blocks add anything new to this pose for us today? I'll tell you what I feel. It certainly might not be the same for you, and that's completely okay. But I feel an additional stretch along my hip flexor, that front part of my hip crease, which feels really nice for me. You could also have this other block under the back knee. That's going to make you a little bit more wobbly, of course. Let's take another breath here and we'll switch to the other side. So gently come down, hold on to something as you transition if needed. Prep the block so that it'll be there for your opposite knee or opposite foot. Come forward. And just as you would do if you weren't using the block, allow your body to equalize here. Draw everything into the center to help stabilize. Now blocks really vary in how firm or cushy they are or smushy. So these are pretty firm blocks that I'm using for this practice. If you have one that's a little smushier, that will add to the challenge whenever you have it under one of your limbs, under a knee, under your foot. One more breath on this side. Okay, slowly come out of this. And we are going to come to standing. The blocks can be a little handy thing as you come up to standing if you want to lean forward and stand up. Come to your mountain pose, and we're going to use both blocks here in mountain. One block will stay in front of you on the mat. The other block is going to go right between your thighs. Now, if the block is too thick, you can use a smaller block. You see my little purple block is narrower than this. If you need more width, you can take the block to the next level. But I think that this width, the lowest width on my regular size block, is good for me today. I want to gently use the inner thigh muscles and the outer thigh muscles to pull into the block or push into the block. Not super hard. The idea is that I want to push into the block with the inner thigh muscles, and then as I spin forward, I want to feel like I'm widening in the backs of the thighs. So I'm coming forward into the forward fold, just like we would normally do, bending over our front hip creases. Softening the knees is fine. And then the front block is here if you need it. And let a little hinge come into your knees. Then each time you start to unbend your knees, they don't have to come all the way straight. Feel as if you're sending the block backwards. Of course that won't happen, but you get that little idea. So bend the knees a little more, the block comes forward. Maybe it feels like it's coming forward more toward your belly. Straighten the knees a little bit, send the block a little back. You're exploring the space in your lower back so you can feel the low back hip points come in as you bend the knees. And then as you straighten the knees, feel as if that, again, that hip points on the back are spreading wide. You're getting a lot of width or space in your low back. One more. And then again. And you can stay here. Maybe you have room to go a little bit lower. Bend your knees and come back up. I'm going to set this one block aside, take the other. Now, I did not practice this ahead of time, so we'll see how I do. This is just for fun, but also to see if we can hold our body in the same place in space as we're using the block. Now, some of us who grew up back in the 70s or 80s learned how to do this with a block on our head or books on our head. So first, this is the first thing. See if you can just get the block to a spot on your head. That in and of itself might be a super challenge. You'll see mine is coming off. You can have it front ways, back ways. Of course, we all have different shapes of our head, so that's also going to be part of how challenging this is. This might not be my pose for today. If you find a spot, see if you can continue to feel as if you're lifting the head toward your ceiling, to the sky, standing up tall. And if you're ready for any little bit more challenge here, you can start to walk around on your mat, or you can shift your weight a little bit from one side to the other side. And maybe you do a little bit of marching. Let's see if I can add some small marches now that I have the block in a relatively balanced place. So the idea is we're not swaying all over the place. We're not shifting a lot from side to side as we move our lower body. Oh, and there it goes. At least I caught it, right? So you can play around with that more. Now we'll try kind of the opposite, where we'll put the block underneath our feet instead. Actually, we'll use both blocks. Use both blocks on the lowest height. I'm going to turn this way. So the blocks are next to each other, your mountain width apart on the low height, and we're going to step right up onto them. Now, as I said, my blocks are fairly firm. If yours are more squishy or you're using a blanket instead of blocks, you will find yourself wobbling all over the place. Feel free to have a wall here, to have a little bit of an anchor so that you don't fall over. Now think about the surfaces that we walk on every day. We walk on a lot of things like pavement, sidewalks, hardwood floors. Those might all be a little easier. We also sometimes walk on things like grass, sand, carpet. Those things are a little bit more cushy, and our body has to adjust. So that's the practice here, is giving our body just a chance to adjust. Now you might find this pretty easy. We're going to take it up one notch and try out something a little bit more challenging. I'm going to step one foot off the block. You can come off with both feet if that's easier as a way to get into this next pose. And I'm going to bend down and pick up the other block. This is just going to help us a little with our imagery. We're going to step onto the foot that's on the block and reach up as if you're putting something on a cabinet in front of you, or a high shelf. But first we'll just practice standing on the block with one foot. So pressing into that block that's on the foot that's on the block. Come back to your mountain pose, balancing the other foot as if it still had the block underneath. So this is tons of challenges. It's some strong strength work for your hips. And then if you're able to do that, reach forward with your arm that has the block. Remember, we're putting something in a high shelf. Start to lean forward a little bit. Your other foot might kick a little behind you. See if you can put your make-believe object on the shelf. Maybe hold for a moment. And the goal is to come out of it as slowly as we went into it. Exhale. Hand back down. And step down. All right, I'm just going to shift that block over, shift the block on the hand to the other hand. Are you ready to try that on the second side? So we'll step the other foot up. Now you'll notice my toes are hanging a little over the block. That's okay. If you have much bigger feet than I do, you might need an extra block, so you stand on two blocks at once, and that's fine too. All right, hold your little object, have your foot stable on the block, lean your weight into your bottom foot, and come up, and you should be able to see it better on this side, where I'm trying to stand as if I'm still in mountain pose, as if the foot that's in space is actually supported. And that's not only balance work, but some good strength work for my hip too. And then I'll start to reach with that other arm, starting to reach up toward my make-believe shelf, putting my make-believe object on my make-believe shelf, hinging forward a little bit as I do this. Certainly if you want to play around with balance, make this more difficult, you can go forward more. I'm going to stay right here. Taking another breath. And then making an effort to slowly, gently come down as smoothly as we went up, or as lack of smoothly as we went up. step that foot back down and release. Let's try one more thing on the floor. We are going to play around with a little bit with balance still, but on the ground. You'll see. All right. So last little bit of making it easier and also making it more challenging, or let's just say more interesting. So we'll take both blocks in front of us and place our feet on the blocks. We're leaning back on the hands. Now, I have a lot of tightness in the front of my ankles, so it's hard for me to get my feet flat. Ankles or back of the heels on the blocks is fine. I'm leaning back. This is a little prep for boat pose. So when you lean back, you want to lean back with a straight back or a long spine. So I'm not letting my ribs sink and my shoulders hunch and my spine round, pushing into my hands, keeping my spine long. And you can turn the hands out if that's more comfortable for your shoulders. And you can stay right here, and this is a great prep for a boat pose. I sometimes call this dry dock boat. Your boat is just sitting here in dock. You're playing around with the balance. Or you can see about taking one leg off, maybe both legs. There's just less space or less of a lift that you have to go through when you're on the blocks to start. You can also use your hands as a little help. And you might find this an easier way to get into boat pose than if you weren't using the blocks. Come back down. I'll show you a little other trick that you can do is keep the one block in front, place the other block a little behind you for a little low back support. So starting the same way, I'll take this in a little closer. You put both heels together on the block, and now when you lean back, you just have a little bit of support under your low back. You're not leaning way back into it. And if you're struggling, that might make it a little easier for your boat. And you could also play around with straightening your legs if you'd like. All right, last thing. This is another thing I didn't practice ahead of time, so we'll see how we do today. Boat pose, balanced, seated on the block. So we did some stuff standing with our feet on the block. Now I'm going to sit on the block and see if I can do what I just did, get into boat pose. So take your block, and again, you might want to sit on several blocks. This one block does not offer me much of a little space here, but we'll try it. We'll see how it goes. Start with your feet on the ground, or you can have blocks under your feet. Take that little lean back, leaning back. My feet are already starting to lift. I'm just going to try to scooch over so I'm a little more evenly on the block. Okay, I've got this part. Feet up, knees bent. And then I'll see if I can take one arm toward the leg, then the other arm. Obviously, you see I've got some wobble here. Maybe I can do a brief little straight leg without my boat sinking. Whew. And then I come all the way down. I'm going to come right off my block so I don't fall over. So I hope you enjoyed this little bit of fun with blocks today. If you've been to my channel before, you know that I love playing with props. I love how props can make poses more accessible and in different ways. If you're more experienced in yoga, they can make harder poses more accessible, or poses that are hard for you. If you're new to yoga, they can make poses that you never thought you could do accessible. That's exactly how I started yoga. Please give me a thumbs up if you like this. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more from me, and have a really good rest of your day.